Welcome, farewell fans. It's me again, Imogen. I am coming to you again with another one-on-one episode. Today, we have Carla May joining us, and we are going to have some very thought-provoking conversations just about pretty much a little bit about anything and everything right now. So she did come out with this book called Youth Talk. And we're gonna jump into that. We're gonna talk about that and everything. But Carla May, can you just give us a little bit about yourself, your background, and everything?
Sure. So I was a police officer in Canada for just about 22 years and retired in 2023. And while I was a police officer, I worked 8.5 years as a school resource officer, so specifically in the high schools. And that was actually where my book Youth Truth came from, and why in my heart I felt that it needed to be written.
Okay, so tell us about your book, Youth Truth. And I do apologize. I think I misspoke. I said Youth Talk
Oh,
earlier.
no,
Yeah.
no problem. So Youth Truth, it's engaging in conversations that can change lives. And one of the things I really noticed when I would talk to the youth in the schools is they would come to me and talk about stuff that was going on. And many times when I asked them if they talked to their parents, there were times when they'd break down in tears or right off the bat said, I would never talk to my parents about this. And so when I started talking to them about why, a lot of it had to do with they were scared, of the judgment that would come from the parents, what they would say, would they be kicked out of the house, um, all of this kind of stuff. Yet when I started bringing the parents in and the youth started talking with them, parents would break down in tears because many didn't even realize that their kids were going through stuff or that their kids were afraid to talk with them. And so, with this youth truth, it goes through 9 different stories, but actual stories from the youth themselves dealing with suicide, bullying, social media, self harm. And then it gives tools as to what can help parents and caregivers of youth to work with their youth in their lives and allow them to be able to engage in these hard conversations.
Okay. So, and this is in coming from being in high school, and having a child. I know that it's easier to confide in leadership at school, so far as a principal, assistant principal, and everyone. Why do you think that um, kids will or teenagers will confide in those people but not confide in their parents? Like, what makes it easier for that person at school easier to talk to than to communicate those concerns to their parents?
I think number one is judgment. And I'm a parent of a 16-year-old son. And when I talk with him about stuff, I actually have to stop and really think after I hear him speak how I'm going to respond because I don't want to come off as being judgy. And many times as parents, we feel, well, we've been there. We know exactly what you're going through, and we know exactly what works and what doesn't work. But many times we don't, because even though we've gone through similar things, our kids are not us, and we're very different. And so allowing there to be no judgment, I believe that is a huge, huge factor in why many kids don't talk to their parents about a lot of things.
I can agree with that. I can agree with that. I think even with trying to create a safe space for my son, um, there's still things that he wouldn't talk about with me, but he would talk about with his mom. And if he didn't talk about it with his mom, he would talk about with his friends. If he didn't talk about with his friends, then there was somebody at school that he probably confided in to have those conversations. And even from my experience growing up, I didn't have those conversations with my parents about certain things that was going on in my life and certain things that was happening at school. I did come from from a school where there was bullying in the school. We had this thing in ninth grade that I didn't find out until 10th grade. It was called Freshman Fridays,
Mm.
where the seniors would go around and beat up the freshmen, particularly on Friday. So I wasn't part of the situation, part of that type of Freshman Friday, but I know kids that were part of that. And who do you go and consult and tell that information to that this is going to happen? And if you do tell, it's going to happen again. Who do you confide in? during those times of bullying um and depression and fear to going to school because you're getting bullied, getting picked on, or you're being traumatized by something that's happening at school or anything, but no one to really confide in, even if it was a school counselor or a principal, because most teens kind of confide in with their friends
Hmm.
more than anything.
Yeah. Well, and even social media, they confide with the social media group. And a lot of times things get found out on by, by reason of social media instead of when it actually happens. Um, I, that's a hard one with the bullying. And one of the stories in the book is about how one of the girls was being quite bullied. And it got to the point where when the parents actually got involved, nothing still was done. And so, and she had even gone to the principal and had said that this stuff was going on. And it continued to follow her until when, kind of when everything kind of hit the fan, the reality of the bullying that was going on, the girl that was actually bullying her was going through so much stuff and actually had been bullied herself. And so it just kind of goes into this rabbit hole, if you want to call it, uh,
Hmm.
until we actually get to the bottom of where all this is coming from. And when we talk to the bully herself, she was going through, there was divorce happening in her family. Her parents never paid attention to her. There was so much more. And now that doesn't give her the okay to do that, but there sure is a lot of background on what is happening, right? And
Yeah.
so I think if your child can find a teacher, even an aide in the school, or even a friend who has kind of the guts to even stand up and come toward to a teacher when it comes to bullying, I think that is so important. Just for them to be able to talk to somebody.
Hmm. I agree. I agree. So, talking about your book, and going into creating safe space and everything. What are some strategies to create safe space for open dialogue with the youth?
So safe space looks so different to so many different kids. So for
Yeah.
instance, if you have a kid that is a gamer and the parent is struggling with, getting that time to just talk with him or her, and they're always just going downstairs, or into their room or wherever they go game. One of the ways that they can kind of make some safe space is to maybe ask their child, hey, can you spend the next 10 or 15 minutes and teach me how to play this one game that is one of your favorites? And so, when you take the joystick, which I learned that kind of ages me, it's now the controller. But when your child hands you the controller and you can sit with this and your child shows you, kind of the ins and outs. And sometimes you have to be very cognitive of not rolling your eyes because you hate doing this. But this 10 or 15 minutes that you spend with your child, even gaming, even if you
Yeah.
don't talk about anything, that just breaks down a huge barrier because now your child feels that they're important, that you value that time with them. And, the next few days, if something happens, your child has a way easier time now coming and saying, hey, you know what? Something's been going on at school. Can we maybe go down and game a little bit and I can talk to you about stuff? So you've now just opened up a whole new area. But again, a safe space for that child was gaming. Whereas another safe space for a child could be in car rides, when you're going to and from activities or school, you they don't have to actually look at you to talk, but I call it windshield conversation or windshield time because they can stare out the window and they can just talk. And that's kind of another safe space that can be, for many parents, that sometimes too is the only time that they might have some real connection with their youth or with their kids.
Mhm. And I can agree with that. A lot of the time spent with my son having conversations, and I kind of tell people that my son has been lectured majority of his life because on car rides to school, mainly I would talk to him about life,
Mhm.
you know, life choices, things that have happened in school, things that happen in the world, trying to not make him grow up fast, but kind of get his maturity more sharpened, so he can kind of start thinking a little bit more about certain things, think about what his future is going to look like, think about his life. I mean, since elementary school, just rise to school is just always a lecture. What do you think about this? What do you think? I heard this has happened in the school, but then also commending him for a lot of things that he was doing as well, rewards and um, different sports that he was in, talk to him about certain things that I seen in school. Like, hey, I seen they had a chess club. Do you think you want to try to do chess? We had a 30-minute car ride to kind of have conversations about life.
Mhm.
And even though he may not have been asking questions or anything, we could be talking about, hey, what do you want to eat for tomorrow? Or what do you want to do tonight? Do you want to go to the movies? Hey, this movie is out. Do you want to go see this movie? So I think safe space, you have to create safe space and segue into safe space by using other conversations as a platform, as a building block to have those more difficult conversations, because you can't just walk into a conversation not having conversations with your child and then try to have like a very extreme conversation and say, okay, well, we need to go ahead and talk about this. And they're like, well, we can talk about it, but how open is that child going to be,
Mhm.
because you're trying to have those conversations?
That's so
And
so true. Well, and I love what you said with the fact of kind of that positive, because I think when your child, it takes a lot of guts for
yes,
youth to say
yes,
anything to you, and especially when it's something that where it kind of sparks conversation or has that hard conversation. And I think it is so important as parents and adults for us to give them the positive reinforcement, because
mhm,
so many times they hear the negative, or what, well, you should have done this, or maybe you could have done this, or that kind of thing. But for them to know that, wow, that took a lot of guts. And I'm really proud of you and thank you. Thank you for trusting me with what you just said,
yes,
right?
yes.
That's so
And
easy.
I, and I think that positive reinforcement um, is always good. So positive reinforcement and guidance. Okay, so as you said, that there are times where, hey, you should have did it this way, you should have did it that way, but instead of using those type of those, I'm not going to say negative connotations, but using those negative reaction words, okay, is what I would call them, because they invoke a reaction of, dang, I did something wrong
Yeah.
and I should have did this, I should have did, instead of saying you should have did this, said, well, the way you could approach, see how you approach it this way, but maybe next time try to approach it this way, you could have a different outcome. And sometimes the phrasing of the word and the phrasing of the sentence, what can be conveyed better and received better than to say, well, you should have did this, you should have did that, but then there's nothing after that. So then you're leaving what you're saying up to interpretation, because okay, well, you made your sandwich with the lettuce on the bottom and not the meat. Well, you should have put the meat on the bottom. But why should I put the meat on the bottom? What's the difference between putting the lettuce on the bottom and putting the meat on the bottom? What difference does it make? But I think us as parents, because we're dealing with so many things that we have to be accountable for and responsible for when it comes to that communication piece, especially with our kids. We try to talk to them at an adult level and expect them to understand,
Mm.
but sometimes we got to break down those barriers of communication and say, okay, you put the meat on the bottom because you're probably going to get more flavor out of it if you do this. But if you put the lettuce at the bottom, the lettuce is wet, it's going to make the bread soggy and it's not going to be as edible. And then they'll pick up and say, okay, well, that makes sense to me. Instead of saying, well, you should have did this, you should have did that. What is wrong with you?
Yeah.
And it's like, this is my first time here, my first time doing it. I don't know what's wrong with you.
Yes.
What's wrong with me? Please help me understand what's wrong with me.
Yeah. Well, and they won't ask for help because you've already just told them that they're not good at what they're doing. So why should they even open up to you and even ask for help. And I think we as parents have, so we bring so many biases, how we were raised, all that kind of stuff in, and our kids kind of hear from their friends, and they've got their own judgment and their own
Yep.
assumptions, but yet we don't come together and talk about these assumptions that we have of each other. And
No.
instead of coming and, like you said, this is the reason why. Now, though, your child has a decision to make and they've got options. They can put the lettuce on the bottom if they want, or they can put
Yeah.
the meat on the bottom. And
Yeah.
that's the one thing, even with, boundaries, because I've had parents ask, well, how do I give my child choices but still have boundaries? And instead of boundaries, I like calling them guardrails, because it's kind of, you're
Yeah.
there to kind of prevent them from getting, injured or hurt or something major happening. But for instance, when your child is younger, you choose three different sets of clothing for them. And say, so here's the boundary is you've got the three sets of clothing, but they get to choose. So they have a choice, but you've given them kind of those guardrails of here's what you can choose. Well, they don't realize that they're guardrails. They just know that they have a choice of three different outfits to wear.
Yeah.
So there's so many things. And even like you were saying, that the way that we say things to our youth, but even to other adults, you can say something to another adult and they'll look at you and say, who do you think you are? You're telling me this. Or you could say that exact same thing very differently. And it's like, wow, thank you for telling me that. I didn't really see it that way. Well, our youth are the exact same way. They would like to, be told something and not either, it be demanded, or, I mean, there's times for that, but, said something in a respectful way to them. And again, you can say that same thing a few different ways and it comes out a few different ways as well and is taken a few different ways.
Yeah. That's true. That's true. So, how can you ask questions that encourage meaningful conversations without making others feel judged? And and before you answer that, I do kind of fall into this category. I think I fall into all these kind of categories. Being a single parent. But in from my perspective, to create meaningful conversations, I would think that you want something in depth and really involved. Okay, and to make others feel judged, it really comes out to the phrasing of the question
Hmm.
in general.
Hmm.
And if we're talking about talking to other adults, and from being in my supervisor days, before when I would approach somebody about a situation that may have occurred, the best practice I learned is using I statements. So I used to be able to walk up to a person and say, "Well, how did you do how did you do this, or why did you do this, or what was you thinking to do this,
Hmm.
or what made you do this, what direction did you have to do this?" And it sounds so accusatory, as like they made a mistake. Okay, and you don't really get a great answer from them by doing that. So then I learned how to walk up and say, "Hey, I noticed that there was this transaction that occurred, and there was some information missing, information wasn't put in there, or no, totals was off. Can you walk me through what you did, and can you help me understand, you know why why did this turn out to be this way?" So it takes the blame off of them, and really kind of opens up the conversation, to open up the dialogue, so they can say, "Okay, well, this is what happened," and everything like that. Then I could say, "Okay, well, now what made you do this? What
Hmm.
direction did you receive in order to do this?" So I can get a better understanding. So maybe I need to communicate that to the rest of the staff.
Yeah. Well, and they may not even realize that something was done wrong, right? So even for them, as they're walking through it, all of a sudden it might be like, oh my goodness, I totally forgot to do this. I'm so sorry. Now walking through it, I see where I made a mistake. You haven't had
Yeah.
to put the blame on them at all. They have come up and said, hey, I'm the one who made the mistake. And then it's like, okay, so how can I fix this? Or what do I need to do? And I think it's the exact same with our youth is, instead of with the judgment right away, which I'm one as well. You know, uh, having grown up, in the era of, with we got spankings, and
Yeah.
we got our mouth washed out with soap if we lied or said a swear or all that kind of stuff, right?
Yep.
And
Yep.
so, of course, you bring in your biases, your judgments, that kind of thing. But I think being able to look at your youth and say, you know what? And like you said with the I statements of, I really feel right now where I'm a little disappointed in kind of what has happened, and I'm not sure where, where this all got to, but can you kind of explain to me what happened? And can you explain to me why you chose this direction versus another direction? It's very
Hmm.
different than saying, "Why did you do this? You're such an idiot." Right?
Yeah.
We're doing that.
Yeah.
And sometimes, of course, anger takes over and we say things that we regret, hugely regret later. But then
Right.
that also shuts down our kids from us. And
True.
so I really believe that, again, just with the judgment stuff, is rephrasing the question, like you said, and finding out even from them, what would they have done differently? Or were there other choices that they could have chosen? Because again, maybe they actually didn't realize, or maybe they actually thought this was the only way that they could figure this out.
Right. Right. And even and along with that, it also teaches the kid, the child, the teenager, how to rephrase their own questions
Mhm.
based on and this goes into leading by example, because if you're doing it to them, they'll pick it up and then turn around and do it to you or do it to somebody else. Imagine a kid walking to you, say, hey, mom, dad, I noticed that, you know, XYZ or whatever like that. Is everything okay? And it provokes an honest conversation, even if the parent is irritated or anything. It doesn't sound as if they're trying to be nosy or trying to get into grown folks conversation, but it's more so of a concern of, hey, I seen this was happening and I'm concerned from what I see, even though I don't have all of the information, but it's just something that I notice. Is everything okay? Or I noticed that grandma hasn't been around. Is everything okay? You know,
Yeah.
because and the phrasing of it, changes depending on the situation. Because anything could have happened, or whether somebody has passed or end up in the hospital, or you just notice anything. But helping them being able to diversify how they ask questions is a huge benefit, because some statements can come off as being assumptive or being accusatory, and it can trigger some people to have certain reactions
Mhm.
or just shut down in general and not talk at all.
Yep. Well, and with not talking, you start engaging more in social media and your friends or your so-called, I'm going to say friends
Yeah.
in social media. And then that can take you down such a dangerous path. If that's where you're going to get your kind of friendship advice or that kind of thing, right? So, I mean, it's this whole thing with keeping conversations open. And I, I kind of chuckle because even as adults, we tend to struggle with having hard conversations with each other. And so
Yes.
if we do, you know, well, no wonder we struggle with our own kids to have these
Mhm.
conversations because we can't even have conversations as adults sometimes.
That is true. That is true. I can definitely say that there are times where it's hard to have difficult conversations with people because you don't know what their reaction is going to be,
Yep.
especially when whether you're working side by side with somebody or you're working above somebody, you're the direct report or supervisor, and you have to have that difficult conversation with them. You don't know what their reaction is going to be. So if you have a hard time doing that, then yeah, definitely you'll probably have the same hard time doing it with your child,
Yep.
because you're trying to have a conversation, but can't really have the conversation if you can't do it with a grown person that can understand what you're saying. You're definitely not gonna be able to do it with a kid.
Yep, exactly. And it's that whole judgment again, right? It's just the
Yeah.
judgment. It's a safe space, and even with active listening, I think that's one thing that I talk about in the book as well, that us as adults to our youth, we don't do a very good job because we will sit and we think we hear them. But as soon as they start talking about something, we already in our mind, we're like, oh, wait, I know how I can answer this. And we already have shut them out for them to even keep listening to what they're talking about because we know what we want to say and this is how it's supposed to go. And there's been times when I've worked with parents and just literally told them to shut up. And I know that
Mm.
sometimes it's not a nice word, but that is the only thing that works with some of them to say, just sit down, do not say anything, listen, and actually hear what your youth is saying. Because they may be bringing something forward, but what they're actually asking for is they just want you to give them a hug and know that you value them and that it's okay. They don't need a reaction in the fact of you telling them what they should be doing. That's not what they need. They just
No,
need to be valued, heard, and seen. Exactly us like adults. Those are things all of us, want and we expect.
I agree. I agree. So when we're talking about difficult conversations and difficult topics, and these few things have definitely been pretty big on the list. Okay, when we talk about mental health,
Mm.
peer pressure, you know, empathy, and everything. How do you approach those conversations when you don't have a safe space for you to have that conversation? You have identified, or maybe you looked at some things that have caught your attention. Maybe it was on social media, maybe you have read a book, however the case is, and you believe that you see these signs that your kid may have. How do you approach that and say, hey, is everything okay? Are you being pressured into doing things that you don't want to do, especially when you have when you have little girls more, especially because peer pressure is pretty big there on
Mhm.
so many different levels, but also with young men when we're talking about mental health.
I think the first thing that you need to do is ask them if they would like to just talk and just say, even for yourself as a parent, hey, you know what? Do you have a few minutes that we can just sit down, go for an ice cream, or just have a conversation? So
Mm.
again, that it's that creating that safe space. And maybe it's just going and having an ice cream, right? Um,
Yeah.
but then at that point, you can bring forward, you know what? This kind of was brought to my attention. And I noticed, say that, you've been less communicative with dad and I, or with me. And I'm starting, I'm really worried that something might be going on, or, something of that effect. Then allow them to, answer if they would like to, or if it kind of goes quiet, you're okay to even say, hey, you know what? If you're not ready to talk, it's okay. But just know that I'm a safe space and that there's no judgment or shame when you come and talk to me. Because shame is another big one. And we forget, I think with adults, shame is huge, especially if you come from any kind of faith-based background and you're dealing with suicide, pregnancy, all that kind of stuff, sex before marriage, all of that, right? And we forget that as youth, there's a lot of shame as well that goes with some of this. And
Right.
right, and so even shame coming and talking to your, never mind the judgment, but now you're going to put shame on a family, or even if you're from a different culture and you're dating somebody who is not of the same culture or religion as you, that's
Hmm.
putting shame
Hmm.
on your family.
Yeah.
So we as adults, I think, forget that these are also things that our youth are dealing with.
Yeah. So when we so I'm gonna say this from my perspective, and and break it down. I love what you said. When we talk about mental health, that one of the things I'll say is that I was very fearful of mental health for my son during the time that when he first entered high school, we went into the pandemic and he had to be isolated from all of his friends. He had to be isolated from those experiences of high school.
Yeah.
And it was really concerning. And as reports started to come out more and more about teens and mental health and suicides and everything that occurred during that time, I was very fearful from the time that I had to go back to work. He was still at home, about what he was going through. And then, you had the cyberbullying that was happening. That was a lot more of it happened then during that time, and it was unescapable. So, there was a huge fear, and trying to make that safe space, have that conversation. But as a teenager, he's been through a lifetime of lectures. You know, just because you have that safe space, sometimes there's nothing wrong. And in your heart of hearts and your soul of souls, something is wrong with your kid, but you just want to know for certain that there's just nothing happening or going on that you don't know about. And then when we talk about peer pressure, there is a lot of peer pressure when, being a teenager, whether it's sex, whether it's drugs, whether it's anything that's out there, but then there's also societal pressures as well.
Mhm.
So when we talk about societal pressures, and let me know if you agree, and maybe I have it incorrectly, but there's peer pressures which you get from your friends, societal pressures which you see what's happening in society, and what people are doing online, and the certain challenges that they do, and then your friends is doing the challenges, and they want you to do the challenges. You trying to keep up with the trends of what everybody else is doing, and find out what is accepted, what is not accepted. Societal pressure to kind of move forward. Everybody is a YouTuber now, or everybody is a TikTok dancer now. And, well, what my friends are doing, I need a phone and I need TikTok so I can go ahead and do it too with my friends. Because now you got 12, 13, 14-year-olds that have high-end cell phones so they can go online and do these TikTok dances because their friends are doing TikTok dances and they see that they getting all these likes, so they want to get likes too.
Yeah.
But then that puts them in a dangerous predicament and situation because now that gives people access that probably shouldn't have access to them that you're not even aware of
Mm-hmm.
in situations like that. So when we talk about mental health, when we talk about peer pressure and you add in societal pressure, definitely being a teen now is different because if you don't have a phone, if you don't have social media, if you're not doing what everybody else is doing, I just find it all exhausting. Like when I was in high school, it was already exhausting to be a teenager in high school. Now it's exhausting to be a teenager because you got to keep up with all the technology. I don't even know what back when I was in high school, it was, Nikes and Baby Napes and stuff like that everybody was trying to jump and train on. But then now it's so much more.
Mm-hmm.
It's so much more. It's not just the clothes aspect. It's the phones. It's the social media. It's the I got all these. Look, I got over 1,000 likes for this dance that I get, and look at my you ain't get a lot of likes. You should try to do what we doing and
Yeah.
everything that goes along with it, and that in itself can spur off into mental health because now you're stressing over trying to be and keep up with everybody else, depending on what your circle. And it's not every team. Don't remember, it's not every team, but there's enough just like, oh, I can't keep up, or you did something wrong online and now it's being reshared over and over and over again, or dare I say it, but we've all been there. You share something with somebody, and
Mm-hmm.
then it was supposed to be confidential, or you confided in that person not to share with nobody else, and now it's being shared with everybody else. And as you stated, the shame, the blame, the embarrassment that goes along with it, and now you're just like, okay, like what do I do? How do I escape this?
Mm-hmm.
And it's unescapable because now everybody in the school sees it and you can't get away from those stairs. How do you tell your parents that you didn't did this?
Yeah.
So now, like I said, now today it's it's so much more to it, to being a teen, and the dangers of it. And it's ultimately, as a parent, I would say, is definitely more frightening now than it was when I was in high school, because we didn't have all this access, social media and everything. No, we had, like, we was happy that we was able to get a flip cell phone. Okay. We was happy when we said, I can remember, I know I'm telling my age, but way back when I asked my mom for a beeper and she told me no. So I went and saved up all my snow and leaf money to go get a beeper, and didn't even know I had to pay a monthly cost to keep it connected. So I had a beeper that worked for 1 month and didn't work ever again. Because I didn't know I had to pay $10 a month for this service.
Yeah.
But my mom knew, but I didn't know.
Yeah.
But had my mom said, well, if you want it, it's going to cost you $20, but it's going to cost you $10 a month to keep it on. But then you still had to run to a payphone just to use, just to call who pays you.
Yep. Oh,
I know I'm telling
man.
my age here.
Hey, we didn't even have beepers back. We had somebody asked me the other day, well, how did you block people? When you were in high school, I said, yeah, I just took the phone off the hook. That's how I blocked people.
Anytime they call was a dial tone.
Yep.
We
Sorry.
didn't have freeway calling. We didn't have, call waiting. We didn't have any of that. If somebody tried to call the house phone, there was the phone didn't even ring.
Yeah.
So everybody didn't have access to us when we were, so if we didn't need to talk to nobody, take the phone off the hook.
Yeah.
And then here come you, why the phone off the hook? Oh, such and such trying to call. Oh, okay, we'll keep it off the hook then. Ain't nobody else calling.
It's true. And one of the biggest things that I've noticed is when we were going to school, we would get off the bus or walk home, and everything that had happened at school was left at school, right? Because as soon as we got home, we would get changed or whatever, go out and play till supper time, and or hang in our room or sit on the phone and talk to whoever. But the bullying that was going on, it stopped. And we
Yeah.
had, say, 12, 15 hours or 20 hours of feeling that, like, of kind of a decompression.
Yes.
Now, kids have the cell phone from dusk till dawn kind of ordeal. And if parents don't put in some boundaries and rules of saying, you know what, after 8:30, the phone's in the kitchen charging, you don't need to use it. Go, if you need an alarm, go to Walmart. You can get a whatever alarm with big numbers, and you just
Mhm.
press, the alarm button, and that's how it goes. But we're having kids sleep with the phone underneath their pillow. So whenever, a light comes in or something happens and it dings, they're not even getting into their REM sleep anymore, because they live and breathe by these phones and by social media. And you talk about the amount of likes, and we look at with depression and suicides. Now the confidence and self-image is based on how many likes you have. Oh my goodness.
Yes.
For myself, I don't know if I wouldn't want to be there now for myself, because I dealt with enough growing up that if I had to go through likes and for people to, that's how good you are. Oh my goodness. Like, I just look back and think, thank you that I was raised in the era that I was.
Yes. 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 So, and that definitely takes us into our next point is, what are some signs that a young person might be struggling emotionally but isn't vocalizing it? Because again, a few of the things we have pointed out and talked about, the mental health, societal pressures, peer pressure, being able to approach these difficult conversations. But we do know at least one person, whether a teen or an adult, that is one day bubbly, communicative, connecting, and everything. Then you have the next day, they're distant, they're withdrawn, and you really don't know what's going on and they don't want to vocalize it, you do have the safe space, but they're still not vocalizing those concerns.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, and you kind of nailed it in the fact of some signs where you could have somebody who is really bubbly and talks a lot, engages a lot, and then all of a sudden stops, you that joy in their eyes or that happiness that you see with them suddenly starts to disappear. They spend more and more time on their own, or it can go the other way where you have somebody who doesn't engage a lot, but all of a sudden, little things just take them over the edge and they start getting so angry with, something that you said, or they get in a fight with their sibling and like all hell breaks loose because this is like the end all be all fight. So there's so many different ways that they can actually show you that they're struggling. And even asking, I think, even asking a teacher, because teachers, um, those that really are engaged and know their kids, they know when something's wrong. And a lot of times too, they'll be in contact either with the counselor or with the parent. But something as simple as, even if they don't want to talk, sending them a text and saying, because now we're in this era, my kid sends a text from the
yeah,
basement upstairs, right? Hey, when's supper? When's supper ready, right? Because it's so much work to walk up the stairs, let me tell you. But send them a text and say, hey, you know what? I'm just noticing that you're a little quieter today. I'm here if you want to talk. Just let me know.
right,
And it's amazing where all of a sudden that evening, you might receive a text and say, hey, can you come down? I want to talk. And maybe it's 4 or 5 hours have passed, but it's giving them enough time to prepare themselves and to get the guts to be able to talk to you about something. Because it
right,
might be something where it was a picture that they sent to their boyfriend or something. And now that boyfriend sent it to three other people, those three others send it to wherever. And as a youth, you're not thinking of where it's going to be sent. You're just thinking of, oh, right on, my boyfriend or so-called this guy, told me he loves me and wants me to send him, a half naked picture.
right.
So, and again, 13, 14, 15, 16, even up to 18, even up to 20, sometimes they're not thinking ahead of what
Right.
the outcome or the, what may happen,
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Sometimes as a teen, even for myself when I was a teenager, I only looked at what the first action and possible reaction was going to be.
Yeah.
I didn't look anywhere further down the line and say, okay, well, if I do this, then this may happen. And then what is going to be my reaction to that, or what's going to happen after that once I do this? Da, 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 da. Nobody's thinking, okay, if I send this picture or I send this video, it's going to, the first thing is, okay, well, I trust them that they're not going to send it.
Yes.
But the alternative that's there is they could send it to 1, 2, 3. That's a possibility. But we're not thinking about that. Oh, we're thinking, oh, I'm gonna send this video. They gonna like it, and they either gonna send something back or whatever.
Yeah.
So when I think it beyond that first action, when I think about it beyond the first action, then there was something else that you had said. I think that going to talk to the counselor and going to talk to the teachers outside of parent teacher conference will kind of give you an idea on what's happening with your child in school.
Yeah.
Only waiting to go around parent teacher conference. I think that that only gives you enough time to find out what they're doing academically, and you may find out some things like, okay, what's happening outside of academics, but it's not an overall picture because you got to think about it. It's maybe a 3 or 4 month period of a whole bunch of stuff happening in that classroom that before that when you get to teacher conference, parent teacher conference, you're only really talking about the academics up to that point.
Correct. Yeah.
So to get an all around picture of what's actually happening at the school, I do think that it takes a certain level of involvement. I'm not saying go be on the PTA meeting or anything like that, but I think it takes like consistent communication, not only with your child, but sometimes maybe if possible, if they allow it, a once a month email say, "Hey, I just want to check in and see how everything's going. Is he turning in his word, grades?" Now I know they got like apps now, because we're in the age of technology. They
Hmm.
got apps now where you can just look at the application and kind of see what's going on with grades and comments, and you can email the teacher through the application. So I say use that application to its full benefit. Use it for its full capability, and be involved. You could be involved without having to actually step on foot on campus because of those applications now.
Yeah. And even email, just sending a quick email. Hey, you know what? Just wondering if you've noticed anything different about Joe. And even the fact I remember when um, I was going through a divorce and my son was younger at the time, but I just wanted to let the teacher know just in case he all of a sudden had an outbreak or something happened where, he got so emotional. Because I think that that was important for the teacher to know that
Mhm.
this is totally out of character for him. But here's the reason that possibly that this could happen. And I think that that's really fair. And I think that that also is fair to talk to your youth about as well. If there's a divorce or there's been a death or something has gone on, let your child know that it is okay of how they're feeling. And that because if they're going to hold in their emotions, then you're going down another rabbit hole with that, right? Because then who do they talk to, and they start holding them deeper and deeper, and then they start shutting down. But allow your kids to realize that, you know what, it's okay. It's okay to have emotions, and it's okay to be sad and be angry, and I'm here to talk about them because I'm going through similar emotions as well. And when you make yourself real to your kids, even sitting down and talking to them about, that you were bullied, or maybe you had tried to commit suicide because this is what was going on and you felt that there was nothing else, and you now knowing that there's more to life and that that's not the only way out, but at that time that's where you were at.
Yeah.
Man, again, age appropriate, right? But, talking to your 15, 16-year-old, now you've just allowed them to see another side of you, that you are a real person. You're not just mom,
Mhm.
right? But that you went through stuff, and that you get it. You understand. So that breaks down a barrier and creates another safe space to be able
Yes.
to bring that in. Um,
Yes.
One of the things that kind of comes up as well is a lot of newcomers to the schools, especially, they're dealing with their own shame, their own even not understanding English or knowing how to communicate properly. And I think it's so important with community to build that community, and for especially the newcomers, or if you've got, different communities around, even kids dealing with autism, or, kids with ADHD, to have a community around so that parents can kind of talk to each other and figure out, what this is what my child's going through. Has anybody had similar issues, or I can't get through to my child? How have you dealt with this? And I think that that's another really important thing, is to have and build community, even like you're doing with single dads. I think that that is so important because you're not alone.
Right. Right. And thank you for that. I feel like, and this from my perspective, I feel like that, there are a pocket of dads out there that are stepping up and doing the things they're trying to do. And I will put them in three categories. There are those that have their kids doing what they're supposed to do, but may or may not have the support system
Hmm.
to do it. Or are doing what they're doing, and um, and do have the support system, and they have everything in place that they need to continue. But then you have another layer that's trying to be in their kids' lives, and either are being forced out, or they're stepping up, any way that they can to be able to provide. And then you have that last sector that's just not trying at all,
Yeah.
and all they're doing is just walking away.
Yeah.
So I'll put them in those three tiers. Um, the first two tiers that I mentioned, I would definitely want to be able to provide them with a community of, who they can talk to, who they can lean on, and have those conversations. Um, Learn new skills, learn new techniques, learn new phrasing. Be able to educate, be the example, and then pass that information on for themselves to their kids. That would be an amazing feat. And then, you know, and everything in between that as well. Um, but it's from what I did, to now has always been rewarding as a
Mhm.
father. I've never was able to put it into perspective or put it into words the work that I was doing until my son turned 18.
Mm. Yeah.
And so for all the fathers that are out there that is doing it, whether they're fighting to be in their kids' lives, um, or you have custody of your kids and you're doing your thing. The job is, I've always thought it was a thankless job, but it's really not a thankless job. It may seem like that in the beginning because they don't know, they're not aware, and they don't understand. But once you get down to the end of it all, there is a distinct possibility that you will be thanked in the end.
Mhm.
Um, and that's for any parent that is out there, not just fathers or any demographic or race or anything. That's just for any parent that's out there trying to put it together and make it happen for who they are taking care of and taking responsibility over. That it may seem thankless in the beginning, but if you're doing everything that you're supposed to do, at the end of the day, the reward is them achieving.
Mhm.
They're surviving, they're living, they're embracing, they're experiencing, they're exploring. That's what it all boils down to.
Well, they're thriving, and I think that kids need their dads. Kids need both parents. And
Yeah,
however that looks, because every family is very different, but that is one thing, don't give up because
yeah,
um in the end, love will prevail, and it's the coolest thing is watching your kids thrive and to see where they continue going. And then all of a sudden, like you said, past 18, and then it's kind of like that. Oh, thank you for doing that because now I actually can see why you did that. And, like
yeah.
you kept saying about your lectures, I wouldn't call them lectures, I would call them discussions because you're discussing stuff, right? A lecture is more like da 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 da, this kind of pointing the finger. But I would call them discussions. And I think that how you've had your talks, windshield time, whatever you want to call it, I think that's beautiful because discussions have come out, and however they've morphed and transformed. But now as he gets older, you have a very a child or a youth now who looks at things in a very different way.
Right. You're right.
Yeah.
You're right. Well, Carla May, thank you for coming on the show. I would definitely say has been a very informative and plentiful conversation.
Thank you. This has been awesome. Thank you so much.
Well, Farewell fans, we will catch y'all on the next go around. Make sure y'all stay tuned for more one-on-one videos. Take care, and we'll see you on the next go around. Peace.